Hi everyone. Regarding today's webinar, so we'll be mainly, talking about the agile transformation and developing the robust technology with the agile and the test automation. Since every organization is craving for digital excellence and to gain the competitive edge and meet the changing preferences of the consumers, so speed has become a quite essential factor, but quality is needed to ensure stability for any digital initiative. So we need to adapt and have some basic agile strategies to improve the software quality assurance, which has become indispensable component in the software development cycle. So whether if you are dealing with some device for a smarter home or it's an application or a smarter car, no one can skip the step to ensure quality. And agile testing is one of the methodologies and approaches chosen by most of the organizations these days to achieve the expected quality standards and ensure seamless experience for the customers. So when we are building the agile technology, we need to just combine it with the test automation approach. So since agile adoption largely focus on development teams and agile frameworks are those that align technical practices within its strategy. Apart from this, a good amount of emphasis is laid on the tools, especially test automation tools, to speed up the development and testing activity. So one of the greatest highlights of agile testing is the collaborative balance that it brings uh, in all the cross-functional teams like the testing and the development teams. And there are multiple reasons and supporting factors that can validate adoption of agile practices. However, like in approaches, like you can work for you if you have a strong supporting strategy. So when it comes to launching digital initiatives for businesses, it is very much critical to focus and spend some time on the strategy part of it, as there is not much scope to waste time and go wrong in the competitive consumer scenario. So most importantly, agile practices also provide the flexibility to go back and forth during the different content of the sprint and the strategies and track the progress effectively. So business agility is imperative in this current digital context. If I say like, if we talk about the buzzwords of today, like artificial intelligence, that provide the immersive experiences, digital twins, event thinking, and continuous adaptive security to create a foundation for the next generation of digital models and ecosystems. So development of any digital powered product and service will require tremendous business agility, which can be achieved by adapting Agile. Uh, so Agile strategy has to incorporate a relevant test automation plan, as it can help teams to speed up the testing processes and assure the quality parameters. So the tools leveraged for automation must induce more collaboration among all the teams, among all the cross-functional teams, and you have to define the frequent testing patterns and high level of the visibility of the automation processes, since most of the automation processes are underlayered in different regions. So it must also provide insights into the testing activity by going back in time and making the necessary judgments related to your test cases, test practices, stories. And test automation is usually, like a glue that keeps the agile practice on track and helps you to speed up the testing activity altogether. So when we talk about leveraging the team's earlier testing experiences, so adopting agile is not enough. It is important to the club, but right software testing strategies does not go along with it. Whether you are doing the test-driven development approach or a behavior-driven development approach, it is recommended to consider the past experience of the software testing team whenever you are building agile strategy. So this will allow you to reduce the pressure on training the team, having the right skills, and accelerate the development activity. Moreover, it helps to bring consensus within the team, which is the ultimate goal of bringing the agile. Because when people with similar experience and expertise collaborate together, you are bound to get good results and a good product at the end. However, adapting a proactive approach towards testing and quality assurance, this is similar to a legacy structures, which is difficult to apply agile practices within the transactional mode of testing, while agile testing becomes much more uh, it becomes much more important than just harnessing a gatekeeper attitude, because it is important to build a much more proactive approach and look at ways in which the application can be made ready. So testing becomes much more process driven, it becomes more scalable, and you have the traceability over it. However, there is a thing like, objective based strategy. Like it is important you to understand as a user whether agile testing approach makes sense for your application development activity or not. Because not all application development activities can align with agile testing practices. So most of the time, agile testing works for applications that need constant updates and alterations, which is very much required for digital transformations. Uh, Hence, it is important to establish the relevance of agile testing approach within the software testing strategy itself. So these two approaches has to bind together, and agile adoption for the sake of it may result in chaos and mismanagement in most of the equations. So the continuing digital business evolution exploits new digital models to align more closely the physical and digital worlds for employees, partners, and customers. Technology will be embedded in everything in today's world, and the digital business of the future is technology. So, when technology gets embedded within everything in the digital business, there is a constant need to ensure quality at every level. Agile practices provides you the flexibility and scalability, but incorporating it into a relevant software testing strategy is more imperative for your successful digital transformation. When we talk about the evolution of test automation, so automation testing is, we do agree to the most extent that automating testing strategy is the necessity for agile development process because it does involve creating separate software frameworks to test the primary solutions through automated means. And the complex solution becomes the complexity of the testing framework becomes higher. So automation testing has become critical once you get to a stage where every release requires execution of thousands of test cases. So since most of the testers are not bound to the code, okay, so when they are not bound to the code, so the initiative of the whole testing cycle starts from uh, record and playback thing because automation relies on code and testers are not coder mainly. So instead of simplifying and speeding up testing work, the opposite is being achieved, like by bringing the record and playback and you use and reuse of the functions as a second generation for the testers, because testers are thrown out of their comfort zone now in the second generation. uh, and they are being bogged down in the third generation by using data driven scripts. So the development teams feels that testing is slowing them down. So when the testing team feels they are required to jump through hoops, and that's where they move towards the fourth generation, which was the action keyword script. So within ever this faster pace with the higher maintenance and required for automation, you start to doubt whether it is you are going to the right path for testing or not. And since the evolution of the DevOps, the pressure to shorten release cycles and the cutthroat competition with web and mobile application the companies are facing, test automation is the right path despite all their challenges. So that's where codeless automation comes in, because codeless is a growing force in mass technology. It has liberated the web. Codeless platforms such as Wix, Shopify, just Architect, Mabel, they all allowed millions of businesses to create an online presence quickly and effortlessly and led to the incredible expansion of the web. The idea behind Codeless is modern day. It's more like giving power to the people. So, like just a decade ago, if you say a small family business from Minnesota would have never been able to afford and maintain an online presence, but now, like a 32-year kid from that place can set up an online shop and then further promote it on the Facebook, and in no start time can start selling their goods to the consumer across the ocean. So applying the same logic to testing instead of coding from scratch test after test, which is more time consuming and costly, and it requires acquired skills. Codeless test automation allows for quick and simple creation of tests. No coding skills required. It allows quality assurance testers to focus on what they do best, which is testing, of course. So automation should not be the hurdle anymore. The testers need to jump above. It should be a tool that pushes them forward and they can add more value as with their use cases. So as things now stand, automation in testing is at the counterproductive standstill. However, don't get me wrong on this, because automation means well, but at the moment it is likely a misguided havoc, even when it aims for the harmony. So it brings more of a revolutionary leap in altogether, where codeless automation functions are very similar to enterprise codeless platforms. Both take complex both the complex tasks to make it more easily and more rapidly. We can get more technical skills than this, but there is no need because this exactly is the idea what Codeless is. So testers are bound to focus more towards testing functionality and evaluating the user experience rather than struggling with test creation. Uh, Codeless automation best utilized in sanity and regression testing, the two most and basic frequently applied tests. Sanity testing ensures that all incorrect inputs a user could enter are counted for regression sanity and inventory counting in a way. So you just need to go over your stockpiles and see that everything is in order, everything is in the right boxes altogether. Uh, However, if you're using codeless automation, all you need for regression testing is to click a button and then scripts run. You are done and be able to divert your attention towards the sanity or the integration testing by making sure your iteration is solid and all that use cases are in right order. Uh, Meanwhile, this codeless automation is also providing more of the conventional code editors. So you can have more graphical and user-friendly environment to do your things and have more visual validation. Now let's talk more about the codeless framework. So in a codeless framework, if we talk about all the testing frameworks are mainly dependent and solely dependent on the test case documents, the test case strategy, how good their test case is being written. And then it definitely requires GUI object, having a right repository, keywords for their parts and dones, and technology wrapper that can be wrapped over the layer for the keywords and the object definitions. So the solution, like, if we take things of like putting up a technology wrapper, let's say that a technology wrapper could be any technology like Java, Python, C Sharp, etc. That you require to know more when you are doing with the open source automation. And this become havoc for more of the peoples. And with the codeless solution, your problem gets solved because codeless testing is creating automation test without writing a single piece of code. And this approach has been steadily evolving. I don't think that it has reached where it has reached its epitome, but it's evolving. And with this new innovation of technologies, focusing more around reducing the coding processes and making it more user friendly. So the ultimate aim is to make the setup so easy to use, so that automating a test scenario takes very less amount of time, because most organizations are tend to avoid test automation because they don't want to invest too much on writing the automation framework and writing the test scripts for the automation. So making everything in process is pretty much easy and very true in the codeless automation. Because, however, like, the drawback could be the codeless is not as accurate as it should be. But there are visual validations, there are visual code frameworks that allow you to do the tool. So codeless actually avoid all these things of the composite test suite setup, setting up and configuring the test environment, executing those tools, and the best part is, and the major part which most of the testers feel is about writing the right flows for your automation script. So codeless takes you away from all these things, and you just need to click around and then play your thing all together for within your framework, doing multiple validations, let it be text, visual, or any kind of validations. And the ROI itself is very huge in it, because you're not investing, but you're not investing a week or months in writing your code, test automation scripts. You are doing it in days, and the days will within the days you'll be running those scripts, executing it right in the frameworks. Sorry, like I just skipped the slide on it. However, like, there are multiple approaches, when we talk about the future of the codeless automation, and how it's going to, either it's going to help the automation or it's going to kill the automation testing. So codeless testing would be a tool only for automation testers, because it's going to fast track their jobs rather than replace their jobs. So in unforeseen future, the tools will become smart enough and that they will completely eliminate the need for test scripts coding. Allowing that won't be the thing here, like, because right now, though, automation testing for the functional aspect is most important requirement of any agile software development processes. Now, that's it from my end, and now I'll hand over to Hans, who will more talk about action-based testing and the BDD frameworks. Hans, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Nabil. That was a very good overview. That was taking a holistic approach to the whole testing and test automation. What I will focus on is one aspect of it, the method for test design. How do you design your test in such a way that the automation is going to be smooth later on? And why is that so important? Because design is basically defines how successful your tests are going to be, both from a testing perspective and an automation perspective. But of course, most tests are made by testers, and many of those testers are not engineers. And some of them might be, but in many cases they are not. They might be seasoned domain experts or people with a lot of knowledge about testing techniques. So somehow we need to bring that design/development perspective into the testing. So the way to do that is to early in the project organize your test. But of course you don't have your test yet because you're going to develop them later. So what you're going to do is you're going to develop like a closet with empty shelves. So you're going to label the shelves. Then later on, when you develop the test, they're going to get a spot in the closet. And you can see there is like price calculations, which would typically be a business-oriented test that will go somewhere. If we get testers to log in, that will go somewhere else. If we enter a testing address entry, that will go yet some other place. So you end up with a design, which it usually only takes maybe a few hours or a few days to create. You build a design, and then later on, week after week, month after month, when you create a test, you're going to put them in the right spot. And creating that design is something you do together with the developers and also the domain experts, so that is a cooperation. And where the developers and the automation engineers can bring in the necessary engineering knowledge. And once that model is in place, the testers can go ahead. They don't need those developers anymore. As long as they make sure the tests are in the right shelf, in the right category, they should be okay. Well. So the method to do that is called action-based testing, and it is a modularized method based on keywords, on actions. So it's particularly good for large and complex test projects. If you only have like 10 test cases or 100 test cases, don't worry about it too much. If you get above 100, and you have like several hundreds or even several thousand, you really should start paying attention to the method of your test design. Let's talk about it. Is supported by Test Architect. That is our tool. We'll talk about that later. What I want to say is the emphasis is very much on the test design to drive the efficient automation. So successful automation is not seen as a technical challenge. It is really seen as a test design challenge. So it's based on actions. That is our terminology for keywords. What that looks like, we'll see in a moment. Most of those actions are about operations that you do in the system under test, for the UI and also for the API. And then, of course, checks of results and behavior values need to be checked. And it depends on the scope of the test. We'll see that in a moment, how detailed those tests need to be specified. So the central product, that's also on this slide, is the test module. And the test module is like the chapter in a book. So first you focus on making a table of contents. Then later on you're going to write the chapters one by one. So let's see what it looks like. This is like a simple fragment of what the test would look like. Here we open an account with an account number 123123 and John Doe. Then we deposit some money there, $10.11. We deposit another $20.22. Now we check the balance of that same account number, and it should be $30.33. Now notice that this test is very business oriented. You don't see anything about the UI. And this test could run in Java Swing or in WPF or in a web browser, or it could be even an API call to a microservice, or it could be on a phone or a device, a mobile device. You can't see from this test, and you don't have to see, because this is business functionality. As long as you know how a bank works, you will understand the test, and you will be able to create tests. And tests like this in that spreadsheet kind of format are easy to create, even if you're not very technical. And so this is what then a test module looks like. So that is based on those actions. In this case, it's about renting a car. And first you have some objectives. What are we actually trying to do in this test module? Then we do a bit of initial work, like starting up the application, maybe do some configurations, do a login. At this point, we don't really care the username and the password. That can be done hidden in that action. And then we're going to go ahead with the first test case. We rent a car with a child seat and all that. And then we check the payment. So again, business terminology. Now later on, we will see that you can also have tests at a lower interaction level, but most of the tests will be like this business level, so that people can understand what you're actually trying to do. And what you also see is that one test case typically flows into the next one. That is not mandatory. You can also do the test cases one by one, but to get like powerful tests, it's much better to have like a narrative that goes from the first test case to the next, where each test case sets up a precondition for the next one. And then, not to forget, the final part, where you typically do some cleanup. Maybe you have make some mutations in a database that you try to roll back. And of course, it will always make sense to have a separate script to clean them up if the test fails to get there. But stuff like that. But notice that is all about test design, and there is not much technology going on here. And in fact, in this example, there is no technology at all. It's completely scriptless, like codeless, like Nabil was talking about. It sometimes takes a bit of time for the next slide to show up. So now, of course, we go one too far. Let me try to get back. Okay. Now, quick screenshot of Test Architect. Again, that is not the topic of conversation for today, but it's good that you to see it as a background. On the right side, you see one of those test modules again. And you see there is a lot of other tabs there, like information, that is user-defined fields or standard fields, test cases, objectives, all of that. On the left side, you see the Explorer tree, where you can see the tests, the test folders, and the test modules. And in the test modules, even the test cases and the test objectives. All of that is there. In that Explorer, you will also see data for data-driven testing, actions, and those actions also need to be defined. Any interface mapping, pictures, graphics. You also see results. Most of the results show up as local results. So you, on your box, you start a test. The test might be on a different machine, but you will get the results back. You keep them local until you feel the test has enough quality to be shared. And that means that you then check it into what we call a repository, where it then is available for everybody, and where the dashboards and the statistics and all of that can use it. Okay, that's enough, I think, about Test Architect. And one conceptual slide about Test Architect is important. Test Architect, we mainly promote it as a test development tool. So automation is good in Test Architect, and that is industry standard, very good automation. However, that's not what it is all about. It's about the test design, and it is about those testers trying to create reasonable test cases. And same for test management. We have wonderful test management, but again, it's not the most important part. And when you look at other test solutions, you will always see that they have some test management and they have some automation, but there is nothing in between. There is very little about actually designing the test. Also interesting, Test Architect uses as much as possible industry standard. So we will use UIA, we will use WebDriver that you might know as Selenium. All of that we will use in our tests. That are not competing technologies. Now, I already said that you can define those actions, and this is one way of doing it in a so-called action definition. So you start with a base of available actions. In Test Architect, it is about 400 of them, and then you can string them together into what we call an action definition to create a new action. Like if you want to check a balance, you first have to enter the name of the customer into a balance inquiry window. Then you have to click a button which is called View Balance. Then you get something back. You get that from the screen and you compare that to the expected value. And the expected value, that pound sign means it's an expression. An expression can be the argument of an action definition. So you see pound amount, that means the real value comes when we use the action. So it's really like a subroutine, like a function. You can define those actions. Once you have done that, you can call it in the test or in yet another action definition. It's a leveled approach. But in the test, you can actually fill in the names and the customer and the amount. Another thing that Nabil already talked about is the data-driven test, which is very doable with the actions. What you do is you take that same test that you already have, but you make more of the field values, the cell values, you make more of those arguments and variables. And you see that pound sign is used all over the place now. And the actual values come from what we call a data set. That are the columns in the data set. So the test will run on a Chevy Volt with John Doe. Then it will come to repeat for data set. And then it will take the next line, Ford Escape for Mary Kane, etc., etc. Chrysler, Buick, BMW, Toyota, all the way through. And for each of those tests, we'll start with capturing a quantity. How many Chevy Volts do I currently have? I keep that in a variable. Then later on, after I rent the car, I check that value. It should be the original value -1. And working that way makes the test less dependent on its specific data environment. As long as you have enough virtual Chevy Volts around, the test will run. So this is more like an overall. Let me go back. Sorry. I want to do this slide first. This is like a high-level overview of what the method then actually looks like. So you start with the test design, that are the chapters in the book. Then you develop the chapters whenever it's convenient, and when you have enough information on what you're going to test. And maybe in the sprint of an agile project, you actually develop the test, but you make sure that the test fits into the proper test module. And then all of those tests use actions, and what you automate are actually those actions. So you never automate a test case. Another important distinction is between business test and interaction test. So business test is in business terms, like we saw it before. We just log in, we enter a rental contract, and we check the bill. Pure, as long as you know how car renting works, you can understand this test. Then the other big category of tests are the interaction tests, where you really zoom in on the details of the interaction. So we enter a username, JDoe, into an edit control. Then we enter car guy into the password field. Now we check the button, the OK button. We check, is it enabled? And we expect that to be true. We expect that button to be enabled. Then we might delete the John Doe from that username field. then we check the button again. Now it should be disabled. So an interaction test focuses on that interaction. And you hardly know that this is about cars and about rental. It's purely about, can I as a user interact with the system under test? Now, if you zoom out a little more, this is what it could look like. You have a project, a test project, that is a system under test that it is testing. In there, we have something called business objects, like cars and customers, locations, staff members, invoices, credit card payments, stuff like that. And that is objects that have a meaning in the business. So that is a very good way to organize a large part of your test. So for cars, then we have business test, and that is typically focused on the life cycle. Can I define a new car? Can I remove a car that is no longer operating? Can I make a list of cars? Great tests like that. And then another category is all those UIs and dialogues. Do they work correctly? Come they in the right screen flow, etc. Then the other categories are the business flows. That is our terminology for really the end-to-end test. And you come in, a customer comes in the morning, rents a car, pays with the credit card, is brought to a location, takes the car for a location, comes back in the evening, put it back in another location. So a process. And that process might hit many of those business objects. So that's another fairly common important category of test that you will typically see in a good test design. And then there's what I like to call everything else. Any protocols you have, communication protocols, XML based, JSON, all kinds of technologies, controls, calculations, functions and features, any data, big data that you might have, security that you want to do, make sure that a desk clerk cannot do admin work and stuff like that. Graphics, 2D, 3D, games, we've done it all. Important in many systems is that you can customize them. For example, if you have an ERP system like Oracle or SAP or JD Edwards, that's very important. And when you change that flow, you need to test whether that still works and still does the business correctly. And then interoperability, if your system works together with other systems, and many companies have mobile applications that interact with a backend application server or a database server. And last but not least, concurrency. For example, Test Architect itself is also tested with Test Architect. And one of the most important tests is if a tester creates a test case and somebody else renames the folder where the test case lives, does Test Architect handle that well? So that kind of concurrency, and even in race conditions, I'm editing a folder while somebody else is deleting it. How does that work? Now I want to give you one example, just to kind of give you an illustration, reasonably well based on practice. Here you see the typical e-commerce site. You also see the typical business objects that you will see there. There are many more, of course, but this is a kind of a selection. Now I'm going to zoom in on one of them, promotions. So if you have a business, every now and again you have a promotion. If you work with Royal Cyber, maybe they have a promotion, please ask. They're going to kill me for this, but I say it nevertheless. Let's look at those promotions. The promotion, from a business perspective, the life cycle is the most important. Can I create a promotion? Can I modify it? Can I modify it before it's active? Can I modify it after it's active? Is there an expiration? And does it expire in the right time? Can I cancel it? But also, what kind of promotion? Is it 10% discount, or is it $10 discount? Is it just Iowa, or is it all over the world? What is the stretch of the promotion? Is it a volume discount? If you buy 10, you get one for free. We have that in Test Architect, for example. Maybe prompt payment. If you pay within 2 weeks, you get 1% discount. Some companies do that. And of course, is it an individual article or maybe a category of articles or maybe the whole shop? And what is the scope of that promotion? So that is the business test. But of course, we also have interaction test. Typically, when you test something like that, you do that screen by screen. So if your application has 35 screens, you will typically see 35 test modules, each of those testing an individual screen. And if screens are big, that might be more than one test module, but that is typically how you would organize it. And then you're going to look for what makes this screen difficult. And maybe I have like a radio button or a checkbox. Is a discount percentage or fixed? And when I change that radio button, then another field might need to change. It might need from an absolute number, it might become a percentage, etc. If I have a region, all the states in the US, then I make it a regional promotion. Do I get a list with states? And can I put check marks with the states to see in which states this promotion is valid? And of course, if I have a start and a duration, if I enter a start name and a duration, the UI should calculate the end date, etc. So from a verbose perspective, this is what your test typically could look like. So I'm creating a promotion that runs in December, 11% for all inventory, but then I create another one, which is specific for tablets, which is also in December, but later to the end of the month. Then I set the date to December 23, and then I check on an iPad mini what the price will be. And then I look at the interaction test. Obviously, I test the button. I test state specific, and then I look at the list of states to check if all the US states are listed and whether I can select them. Now let's look at what this looks like in keywords, in actions. What you probably notice is that it is even more readable than the text. And you really see, okay, apparently I have a promotion. For the name of the promotion is Christmas, typically a detail that you leave out when you just describe the test. And that makes the method so strong that testers are encouraged to be detailed enough while they're still in their own domain. They can totally understand what's going on here. And because you only automate the actions, the maintenance is very simple, the automation maintenance. So I create one promotion, I create the other promotion, then I do what we like to call time travel. So we change something in the environment that changes the time, and then we check the net price of the iPad mini, and that should be $284.79. And when I do an interaction test, I click the new promotion button, then I select the type is state, then I look at the list of states, and then I check American Samoa. And that is deliberately a state that you might not expect. And that's the whole idea of being a tester. You try to do a value that you system under test might not be expecting, and just to stress that system under test a bit more. And it also shows that interaction tests are not like dumb tests. And the interaction tests are just as, if they are good, they're just as intelligent as the business test. Now, when you look at that from the Agile perspective, which Nabil was talking about, and you can see that that fits very well. You start with that overall table of contents that I talked about, and then what they call high-level test design, and with the module definitions and the business objectives. Then most of the work in the projects that we see is done in those Agile sprints. Usually you mix your testers and domain experts with the developers and the product owners, and they work together. And while the developers are creating the system under test, and the tester role is to create the test for it. And as long as you have organized those tests well, remember that closet with the empty cells, that can be very well organized, and you will be able to get all of that done and automated before the end of the sprint. which is typically the most challenging thing about Scrum, getting all your tests developed and automated and executed before the sprint ends. Once you have done that, you can start reusing, obviously, the test. You can rerun them as much as necessary, but you can also reuse that automation because you have those actions. Those actions have been defined, so you can start using them. And then you can set up something we call dispatching, and we have a tool called TAQ for that. And you can automatically process those test modules and send them to a bunch of machines, usually virtual machines, maybe even containers. And that that dispatch tool can automatically queue them to the right machine, the right virtual machine, etc. One more thing to tell, and then I give it back to Nadil. I'm running a bit out of time. Apologies for that. About BDD, behavior-driven development. You might have heard of that. You might actually have seen that. The example that I show you here is actually in Wikipedia. So if you go into Wikipedia, you look up BDD, you will find this particular example. Given the customer bought black sweater for me, and I currently have 3 black sweaters, then when I return one, I should have 4 black sweaters in stock. So good narrative, and these scenarios are usually called GWT, given, when, then, and it's a good way to describe both a test and also for the developer the functionality of the test. Now, when you combine that with actions, you can actually make something like a converter that uses a template in which you can translate to both ways. We have a tool like that. So you can take the sentences, translate them into the more systematic keyword approach, which, by the way, is still very understandable for domain experts. But you can also work and manage everything in those keywords and then translate them back into the sentences whenever it's necessary, whenever you have to share it with somebody who's not part of the project or anything like that. Okay, that was it for me. So now I hope you liked it. I gladly gave it back to Royal Cider and Nadil, and take it from here.
Thank you, Hans. Thanks for all the details.
Thank you.